A temporal paradox or time travel paradox is a logical contradiction or seeming contradiction tied to the concept of time travel or prescience. Although time travel to the future is valid according to our current understanding of physics through concepts like relativistic time dilation, time paradoxes emerge from hypothetical situations involving time travel to the past. These paradoxes often serve as proofs of the impossibility of such travel. Three main types of these paradoxes are bootstrap paradoxes, consistency paradoxes, and Newcomb's paradox. Bootstrap paradoxes refute causality by influencing past events from the future, effectively causing themselves, a concept known as bootstrapping, which is derived from the phrase pull oneself up by one's bootstrap. Consistency paradoxes happen when events from the future influence the past, creating an apparent contradiction, such as the grandfather paradox, where a person travels to the past to assassinate their own grandfather. Newcomb's paradox, on the other hand, spawns from apparent contradictions, coming both from the belief in free will and the foreknowledge of future events. These paradoxes are sometimes called causal loops. The terms time loop and causal loop, although seemingly similar, are distinct. Causal loops are unchanging and self-originating, while time loops are in continual reset mode. A bootstrap paradox, also known as an information loop or information paradox, happens when an event, information, or a person causes itself due to time travel or retrocausality. Backward time travel would, theoretically, allow the existence of objects, people, or information that seem to originate from nowhere. This existence without origin, often regarded as paradoxical, is a common feature in the bootstrap paradox. A notable example is highlighted in Everett's analysis of the movie Somewhere in Time. Here, an old woman offers a watch to a playwright who then travels back in time, meets the young version of the woman, and gives her the same watch, thus causing its own existence. The second class of temporal paradoxes involves the creation of information from nothing. Smank reserves the term predestination paradox for scenarios where a time traveler attempts to prevent a past event, adding a deeper layer to the complexities of temporal paradoxes. The grandfather paradox explores the potential impacts of altering past events, with numerous permutations including self-termination in the past, and the infamous Hitler paradox, where a protagonist travels back in time to assassinate Hitler before he instigates World War I and the Holocaust. The work of physicists like John Garrison has further developed this paradox, suggesting instances of electronic signals being sent to shut itself off via a time machine, only for the signal to be received before its transmission. From a philosophical perspective, the grandfather paradox has prompted theories concerning time travel's inherent paradoxical nature, thus suggesting its logical impossibility. This was argued by philosopher Bradley Dowden in Logical Reasoning, who based this claim upon the inherent risk of contradiction. Yet, many argue that past time travel may in fact be logically possible, provided the past isn't altered. As suggested by the Novikov self-consistency principle, Dowden even revised his initial theory after discussions with philosopher Norman Swartz. Paradoxes such as the one named after Newcomb often extend to debates surrounding causality and free will, probing the idea of perfect predictors, mechanisms that, if time travel exists, can accurately predict future outcomes, seemingly contradicting the concept of free will. This idea doesn't necessitate a supernatural element, but could be a result of other infallible foreknowledge mechanisms. Whether or not time travel to the past is possible physically, it can be demonstrated using modal logic that changing the past results in a logical contradiction. If the past happened in a certain way, it is both false and impossible for it to have occurred differently. This implies that a time traveler would only affirm the past's events rather than alter them. Finally, the contemplation of backward time travel is illustrated by a Gödel metrics-led renowned logician Kurt Gödel to propose that time might essentially be an illusion. He suggested that time should be seen as another dimension like space within a four-dimensional blocks. Where all events are fixed, this encapsulates the central theme of these paradoxes: the troubling and mesmerizing relationship between time, causality, and the constraints of logical reasoning. In a 1992 paper, physicists Andrei Losov and Igor Novikov introduced the concept of jinn, inspired by the Quranic supernatural entities that vanish without a trace. Their thesis put forth jinn as a term to categorize entities or information that had an untraceable origin. They distinguished between two kinds of jinn, which they referred to as the first kind and second kind. They argued that these entities are identical whenever they travel back to the past to keep the continuum consistent. Losov and Novikov also contended with the second law of thermodynamics, which suggests that objects tend to a lower energy state throughout their history. They argued that Jinn could interact with their environment to regain their lost entropy. Defying this law, they also noted that there aren't substantial differences between Jinn of the first and second kind, leading to an overlap of their definitions. In a different take, Krostakov introduced a similar concept of lions or self-existing objects, arguing that they, like the conventional objects, only appear from infinity or singularity. He conflated the terms Jinn, self-sufficient loops, and self-existing objects. Drawing from these ideas, Igor Dmitrievich Novikov developed the self-consistency principle, claiming that backward time travel may be possible without creating paradoxes. This principle posited that anything a time traveler does in the past, in fact, becomes part of that era's history, avoiding an inconsistency. Exploring this paradoxical possibility, physicist Joseph Polchinski theorized a scenario where a billiard ball is fired into a wormhole and travels back in time, only to collide with its past self, preventing it from entering the wormhole in the first place. This idea, often referred to as Polchinski's paradox, was further analyzed by Kip Thorne, Fernando Echeverria, and Gunnar Klinkhammer, who provided multiple self-consistent solutions to it. A later analysis by Thorne and Robert Forward noted that specific initial trajectories could yield an infinite number of self-consistent solutions. However, it remains unproven if a self-consistent extension exists for every possible initial trajectory. The theme of the story revolves around the concept of multi-universe interaction, which is a variant of many worlds interpretation in quantum physics that suggests time travelers might end up in a universe separate from their origin. However, critics note this does not necessarily constitute classics time travel, as they are not traveling back into their history, but rather into another universe's past. Renowned physicist Stephen Hawking advocates for the chronology protection conjecture, asserting even within the multi-worlds interpretation, a time traveler should encompass a single consistent history, suggesting their journey is confined to their original universe and not a foreign one. Similarly, David Deitch concludes that back-in-time quantum computation only creates self-consistent solutions. He further argues that the areas where chronology is violated impose certain restrictions which are not obvious under traditional reasoning. Although it has been revealed that Deutsch's consistency condition can be accurately satisfied by any system abiding by classical statistical mechanics, even those not constructed of quantum systems. Furthermore, Alan Everett posited the potential weakness of Deitch's theory, suggesting macroscopic multiparticle objects would disintegrate when traveling back in time, with the particles separately emerging into distinct universes.